This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 381, entitled Big Historical Shifts: The Pill, Feminism, Masculism. This is part 2. Continuing straight on. Masculists lash out at women, saying that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, since women's oppression of men is continuous and lasts decades. Another such major gender crime committed by women is paternity fraud, in which the husband is not the father, which is the case in about 5% of pregnancies. Masculists are men, and hence are nearly all FIPs. Men are socialized to be FIPs. Men even evolved to be FIPs. So men are in a position to force women to FIP up, or be severely punished by men by being forced to be manless. A fluffy can only be a fluffy if she can get her financial claws into some gullible manslave, but the masculists and MGTOWs are causing the supply of such gullible manslaves to dry up, as men become masculisted and refuse to be parasited on by the hated fluffies. The quality men, the alphas, due to their superior intelligence, are the first to go masculist, to be influenced by the masculist ideas coming from the masculist sages, that is, intellectuals. The alphas are the type of men that women really want to mate with to obtain the superior DNA from superior men for their kids, a female instinct called hypergamy. Men have a monopoly over their sperm, so are in a position to deprive women of their sperm while the gender laws are until the gender laws are men-fared. For example, by men-faring the divorce courts so that alimony is scrapped, custody of kids is made joint by default, no splitting of assets after the divorce, legally respecting prenuptial agreements, etc. The para needs to be legislated, etc. Masculist theorists are pushing men to push women to vote for the men-faring of the gender laws. Otherwise, quality men will continue to refuse to give women their sperm, so that increasingly now young women are panicking as they observed in boyfriend after boyfriend that the quality young men they want to mate with refuse to give them their sperm. These young men are becoming increasingly alarmed at the toxicity of the divorce courts, taken over by the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, so they become masculists and MGTOWs, eschewing marriage and paternity like the plague. The masculists are telling young women that they should vote with men for the men-faring of the gender laws, otherwise they will be punished by men by not getting one, and more importantly for women, by not being given men's sperm, thus making them babyless. Masculists tell young women that young women would prefer to give up their privileges in the divorce courts than be forced to be babyless due to the boycott of men against giving women their sperm. Thanks to the internet, with its empowerment of the individual, hundreds of masculist and MGTOW theorists are now putting up videos on the internet lashing out at women for the massive gender crimes that women commit against men, and threaten women with manlessness unless they become bi-conscious, that is, have both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised, and vote with men to men-fare the gender laws. Masculists have no qualms lashing out with real venom and hatred at fluffy parasites and fluffy feminist hypocrites who masculists see as manslavers and hence as slavers, committing a massive injustice that will eventually get such women killed in a sex war, since no culture that crucifies a quarter of its fathers in the hated fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts can survive. Men will snap, pick up arms and go into the streets and kill the misandrists by assassinating the gender politicians who created these deeply misandrist gender laws in the first place. We'll murder hundreds of feminazi divorce lawyers and judges, and if things really heat up, we'll go out into the streets and slaughter millions of feminazis who see men as cash machines to be robbed and abused. Women will soon be confronted on a mass scale by very angry, hateful masculists, to the point that any feminist stupid enough to make derogatory remarks about men in a mixed audience will risk having her fucking head bitten off by very angry masculists in the audience who will not tolerate her hypocrisy, knowing, as masculists, that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, given that women's oppression against men is continuous and lasts decades. Masculists see fluffies and fluffy feminists as vermin, as parasites, as manslavers, to be wiped out by not being given any sperm. Masculists see masculism in the 21st century as the abolitionists in the US saw Negro slavery in the 19th century. Masculists see manslavery as slavery, but on a far larger scale than that of Negro slavery. Slavery rouses passions. Slavery was a war issue. Look at the passions behind the US Civil War that was largely over Negro slavery. Masculists demand that women, that society, that the law have its masculist consciousness raised so that it equates man's slavery with slavery, so that tremendous moral pressure be put on women, especially young women at age 16, to choose not to be fluffy crappers, studying fluffy crap majors, so that they become career competent and not expect to sexploit some gullible, stupid, ignorant manslave and have him work for her, so she can sit on her fat, parasitic, fluffy ass raising her kids in a middle-class house that he pays for, then divorces him, destroying his life for all the reasons given above, making such women truly hated, to be severely punished by being wiped out, having their fluffy parasite genes removed from the gene pool. Masculists push for the formation of masculist groups in every high school and college so that young men can put real moral pressure on women not to be fluffy crappers, to study career competent majors so that they become real fips as adults and pull their financial weight, not expecting to be fluffies as adults. There's real exponential growth in the number of masculist videos on the internet now. Millions of men are being influenced by masculist ideas and are seeing the world differently. So are some women. There are a growing number of female masculists who agree with the masculists that the gender laws need to be made men fair. Otherwise, male anger and hatred at women will boil over into a sex war and women will be killed in large numbers. With the current gender laws, men are facing a far greater casualty rate than in a major war. As more millions of men wake up to this reality, they will become murderously angry and will take up arms in a sex war. Men are smarter than women, with men's 10% larger brains, 4 IQ point superior average IQ than women's, having 10% larger IQ variance than women, so that the morons and the genii are men, so that men win 99% of the science Nobel Prizes. Men also have 10 times larger testosterone levels than women, so are much more aggressive and ambitious. When men become collectively angry at women, which is now very much the trend, then God help women. The ultimate backup of the law, including the gender laws, is brute male force, that is by male cops. When these male cops themselves become masculists, then women are fucked. They will face the same anger at them by male cops as by males in general. As masculist anger and masculist ideas spread throughout the culture, a major historical shift will take place. Women will be forced by men to become bi-conscious. The gender laws will be changed. The para will be legislated. Women will be forced to fip up or to rot on the shelf, spat at by men and by female masculists. Traditional monoconscious feminazis will be hated by both sexes, since young women will agree with the masculists that the root cause of their babylessness is the toxicity for men in the divorce courts created by the hated monoconscious fluffy feminist hypocrites. Pretty soon, monoconscious feminism will die out as feminists of that type learn how frightening it is and how painful it is to be verbally abused and harangued by both sexes, that is masculists and female masculists, if they come out with misandrous statements in mixed audiences. They will risk having their fucking heads bitten off by masculist hatred towards them. Increasingly, manslavery will be seen as slavery and hence a moral abomination, a war issue, and the fluffies and fluffy feminists will be wiped out. As masculism spreads through the culture, a historical shift will occur that is as significant for social change as was feminism. Masculism will profoundly change men's lives and women's lives as well. Men in their millions will reject the traditional man-slave role of the male and will choose to become masculists and MGTOWs, thus forcing the birth rate to crash, forcing the politicians to men-fair the gender laws. Parents will socialise their daughters to fib up and threaten them with babylessness and utter social rejection if they don't. Everyone, a few years from now, as masculist ideas spread, will know that gender oppression is not a one-way street. Both sexes will be as familiar with masculist arguments as feminist arguments and will utterly reject the idea that gender oppression is a one-way street. I believe it's only a question of time before the collective rage of the masculists will have become so high that we will see the arsoning of family courts, the assassination of gender politicians, a steep increase in the murder rate of feminazi divorce lawyers and judges, and a large increase in the appearance of very angry masculist op-eds in newspapers and magazines, lashing out at feminazi monoconsciousness in all its gender political ignorance and callousness towards men. In a gender bi-conscious world, after the gender political dust has settled, the world will be a completely different place. Women will be FIPs. Men will have been given men-fair gender laws so that they are prepared to be fathers again. But since this may take a generation or two, the drastic fall in the birth rate due to men's boycott of giving women their sperm will play an important role in the solving of the global warming problem, since with a tenth of the current world population, there will be far fewer greenhouse gas emissions, less melting of the polar ice caps, so less sea level rise, and less drowning of the coastal cities. But the birth rate, sooner or later, must rise over the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman, or we wipe ourselves out. When whole populations are threatened with their very extinction, they go to war, they pick up arms, and they go on a mass killing. If the feminazis don't stop their massive gender crimes against men in the divorce courts, their tooth and nail resistance against the legislation of the para, etc., then there will be a sex war. Millions of feminazis will be murdered by murderously angry masculinist soldiers at the massive injustice committed against them by the feminazis and feminazi-biased gender laws. Either way, that is, either a sex war or the men-fairing of the gender laws, future historians will claim that the rise of masculism was one of the major historical events of the 21st century. Whole chapters devoted to its rise will find their place in the history books, along with the importance of the rise of feminism, that so profoundly changed women's lives, transforming them from being predominantly baby factories and child raisers to being careerists, freeing men from manslavery, to allow men to get the sex they need from women without paying the horrible price of being a manslave to a fluffy parasite for most of his life. In the post-masculist era, men will be much more able to do with their lives what they want to do and not what some sexploitative fluffy parasite or some wage-slaving employer wants him to do. In a post-masculist era, men will finally be free. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de GARIS. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 380 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.